Hi everyone, it's Tyler here. Looking at some of the things that we are talking about. First things first, I'm in my second year of this clinical mental health counseling program. It is my second master's, and I've worked in mental health for about 10 years now. Got the first master's early 2023, and I've been a therapist since then. Naturally, going through this internship process at Bushnell has gotten me more supervision, more oversight, and honestly, I feel like my skills have gone up. So I'm really thankful that I chose to make this one of my educational goals. And I think that deciding to go down a licensure pathway has taught me a lot about how to provide counseling. Specifically, I think my training and assessments, I think working with families and doing group work, that is all newer to me. So I really enjoyed learning about that. For populations that I like to work with, I'm very drawn to stigmatized populations and more specifically ones that get overlooked through what I call counter stigmatization. So people in law enforcement or first responders or veterans, people who do really hard work and may experience some pushback from their communities or from society. Looking at the prompt about life experience and how that has shaped my view and approach to medication and providers. Just a little history. I was diagnosed with anxiety when I was around 10, like when my parents were getting separated, and honestly tried to work off of that for about 18 years. The anxiety medication I was on kind of created its own set of problems. And for a long time, I felt like that was my fault. But then just recently, in the last couple of years, when I was 28, I was diagnosed with ADHD. And the right medication has pretty much created the most steadiest, regulated version of myself I've ever known. Um, Looking at some research in a 2022 review, Choi and others found that ADHD does often go unrecognized in adults, so the co occurring conditions can get caught while ADHD is usually hidden underneath. Um, they even found that up to 80% of adults with ADHD do still carry another psychiatric diagnosis. And that was pretty much my experience. So I had an anxiety label that was sitting on top, but none of my providers were really looking to go any deeper. And in our text, Preston mentions how the same medication that is given to two different people can affect them in completely opposite ways. And they argue that a good clinician would treat the person and not the disorder. So for me, living on the wrong side of the gap in disorders for about 18 years taught me not to hand my full trust to a prescription without fully understanding what it's treating in me. Um, Culturally, my family has an influence too. So I grew up in a Jewish family, and mental health wasn't really something that we talked about out loud. It was more silenced. Um, like my grandfather, he lived with depression for my whole life, but I only knew because my mother would tell us quietly. It was almost like a secret that we could never repeat. And then, actually, within the last 3 months, my grandpa directly told me that he has depression and that he takes medication for it. And he was very emotional when he was telling me he was crying. And he had no idea that I already known all these years. And I think in that moment, I saw how much culture can shape how much somebody even feels allowed to talk about their own mental health and their treatment. Um, Going back to the textbook, Preston uh, mentioned that a person's cultural and ethnical background shapes their beliefs about mental illness and medical treatment, and how that can get overlooked in common care settings when just going through a checkbox of symptoms or looking at client report at face value without looking into cultural variables. Um, I believe both of these experiences shaped how I view medication and then how I work with clients around medication. Um, the last thing I'll say from the text would be that Preston found the same drug affecting two people differently is part of why I pay such close attention to what drives clients' symptoms. I like to ask when they started, what settings they intensify in, when they're not as present, um, And then I try to figure out if they're showing up in mood or if they're affecting this person's thoughts or behaviors. And I think understanding that pattern is what lets treatment and medication feel appropriate for the person that I'm working with. Um, I recently gave, oop, 5 minutes.